You're okay? Great. We have a full house tonight, so thank you all for being here. I'm Stacy Siegel, and I'm the Executive Director for the Seattle Architecture Foundation, and I'd love to welcome you to the Center for Architecture and Design. How many of you, this is your first time here? All right. We have a lot of repeat visitors and a lot of new faces. The Center for Architecture and Design is a shared space between AIA Seattle, Seattle Architecture Foundation, Design in Public, and AIA Washington Council. So we all have offices in the back. This space up here is public space for a variety of events, including exhibits like what you see tonight, but we have all kinds of talks in here, workshops, programs for kids, and it was made possible thanks to the donors for the Center for Architecture and Design who are featured on the wall. And first I want to thank the SAF sponsors for tonight's exhibit. And so we have our diamond sponsor, I'm supposed to turn the screen, is Element Architects. Our platinum sponsor is MG2. And then we have several gold sponsors, Hargis Engineers, McDonald Miller Facility Solutions, Morrison Hirschfield, Skellinger Bender, and our grant maker for culture. We truly appreciate the support from these generous sponsors, which makes events like tonight's possible. The Seattle Architecture Foundation is a nonprofit, and a large portion of our revenue comes from our sponsors and members. For those of you who may be less familiar with SAF, we are a volunteer-driven organization, and we host a range of programs that inspire the public to connect with the city's architecture, design, and history. Programs include architecture walking tours, which is the perfect season. We have more than 13 of them this year, so get on one while you can. We also have youth and family workshops, exhibits, and other programs. And within each of our programs, there is a way to get involved. So if you're looking for a way to get connected as a volunteer, we have opportunities for you. All of our programs, including tonight's talk, are organized and developed by volunteers. And if you're not a member, I encourage you to get some information. We've got information up on the front, and we also have that online. It's a great way to support SAF, get involved, and shape our city. Plus, you get a free tour just for signing up. And now I'd like to turn it over to Jeremy Redding from DLR Group. His firm is one of the sponsors of the exhibit that we have in this wonderful space.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jeremy Redding. I'm an architect at DLR Group, or an architecture, engineering, interiors planning firm. And this exhibit really spoke to me almost 20 years ago when I did my thesis. Seems so long ago now. I spent a lot of time studying kind of just the now, everyday moments of our lives, and thinking about how we could better use that time, or what we should insert into that to maybe use that space differently. Kind of a closet situationalist, if you read any of the literature back then. But Design in Public has always been a way to kind of have that outlet to really engage the public, as well as a group that I helped co-found, the Seattle Design Nerds, if anyone is familiar with their work. It was also born out of a lot of the work happening with Design in Public and the Seattle Design Festival. And our mission there was just to make Seattle a little more awesome. So really, art in the public space is that same kind of thinking. So when this exhibit came up, DLR Group is really proud to be a sponsor of it. Really looking forward to the lecture tonight, and I thank everyone for being here. So thank you.
All right. So, we're going to start our talk in just a minute because I know y'all can't wait. But first, I want to introduce you briefly to Jesslyn Howard, the moderator for tonight's lecture. For this evening's discussion. Jesslyn is a culture content creator and advocate for race, gender, and social equity in design. She has a master's in architecture from UW and works at Gordon Bellum with a vision of integrating film media to the industry of architecture and design. And more information is available in your brochures on all of the panelists, but now I'm going to turn it over to her to introduce you to the panelists and the talk and get going.
Hello. I really shouldn't be using a microphone because I have a really loud voice, but welcome everybody. This is a packed house. I've heard that we usually turn out maybe less than a third of this audience, so I think we have more people coming. If you see anybody, make sure they get a seat. Get really close. I know you satellites don't like to do that, but just, be inclusive. Like she said, my name is Jesslyn. I did in fact get my degree in architecture, but if you want to know more about that, read the brochure that you guys have in your lab. What I really want to talk about is why I care about this topic. I am an immigrant. I was born in the Philippines and moved to the Pacific Northwest by way of Culver City in California. And I have been in the Pacific Northwest for maybe, I don't want to tell you my age, but let's just say like 30 years. And, you know, I'm a product of all the public schools in this state. Tukwila, Federal Way, Bremerton, Lakewood. So what you see here is someone who really knows what it's like to grow up in the greater Seattle area. As a person of color and as a woman, I gotta say, I would never have known how to propose getting a public art project started. And to be fair, architecture kind of fell into my lap by way of some connections that I made when I was younger. But, you know, today I look around and I feel like Seattle is pretty sterile. We don't really have representation in public art or just in the urban fabric in general. I think everyone here can probably agree with that. And that's why I'm really excited that I get the privilege and the opportunity to talk with these folks here because they're really the experts on how we can foster, facilitate, and empower artists, architects, designers, developers to really collaborate and, you know, kind of mess things up a little bit. Because right now everything is just a little too regimented and a little too oppressive, to be completely honest. So yeah, talk to me after the lecture if you want to have like a real conversation. But yeah, we should just get started. Thank you. This is Ruri. She's going to be showing you some slides, but I think she will also be introducing herself.
Oh, am I introducing myself? Okay, hold on. I want to just get the timer started.
Hello. Okay, I'm Ruri Yampolsky. I am with the Office of Arts and Culture. I manage a public art program for the office, which is an office of the City of Seattle. I have been in this area for about, I guess, 29 years. I am originally from New York. I'm actually trained as an architect. I'm technically registered as an architect in New York still, but I have not practiced architecture for as long as I've been here. So I'm just going to go through my slides. Okay, I've got a website. So, as I said, I'm with the City of Seattle. The City of Seattle has an ordinance. It's called the Percent for Art Ordinance, and it basically, the city has taken responsibility to ensure that people have access to art. They, 1% of all the capital construction projects, eligible capital construction projects, come into our program to manage to make sure that art is included in the work that the city does in the buildings. So this is roadways and parks and bridges and fire stations and that sort of thing. And one of the things that sort of distinguishes Seattle's Percent for Art program from some of the early programs that were really about beautifying public works with art was the idea that art had a social purpose. That really art could be out there and help build community, help people understand their lives, help them understand their city. So we do a number of different things. I'm not going to list all of them. I think a lot of you think of public art as kind of all the permanent projects that you see. You might see Hammering Man, or you might see some sculpture or something attached to a bridge. But we do a whole range of things, including performances. They're all generative. We commission projects. We don't give grants, but we actually commission projects. But we have put artists in residence in the Fremont Bridge, in sort of, visual artists, poets, or literary and musicians as well. We've done temporary projects. So a whole range of things that are sort of considered public art, which sort of go beyond the realm of what one normally thinks of as public art. And part of the goal of what we're trying to do is really to make that sort of going through the city be a humane experience. We want people to sort of understand their city through the art, to make that city more livable. The idea is that, here we run the city, we want to keep people in the city. So as people go through the urban realm, if it is sort of enlivened with art, and your experience is kind of ameliorated by seeing art, sort of the idea of making that art the city more livable. One of the things that really guides our work is the idea of equity. So we want to make sure that people who create the artwork, the people who have access to the artwork, the audience, sort of represents everyone who lives in the city. We want to ensure that the community is engaged in the artwork projects, that that there's collaboration, and then we also talk a little bit about the idea of placekeeping. And I think a lot of people, when they think of placemaking, but placekeeping is really sort of recognizing that there were people before us, there are people who live in communities, who've been there, and how do you preserve those communities and allow art to sort of recognize who has been there. And so this is a project that we did on 23rd Avenue, the Central District, which was the area that African Americans were redlined into, and really developed a community-engaged project that really talked about the living stories of people who live there. We call it We Are Still Here. We talk about transformations. That's the title of this talk, of this event tonight, and we use art to really transform a site sort of throughout. In this project, which is the Denny Substation project, which has now been completed over on Denny. Before the project was going in the ground, it was basically a site for about 18 months. It was just basically, it had been remediated. It was the old Greyhound bus station. And so we had a program of 18 months of activations where there were performances, temporary art projects. One of my favorites is actually Molly Dilworth tried to make a quilt out of sort of wildflowers. Unfortunately, it was a drought summer, so it wasn't super, absolutely successful. But then afterwards, we actually brought in goats to eat down everything, and that was like incredibly popular. People were just out at the site. It brought attention to the site. It also, it actually helped keep some of the sort of negative activities off the site. And now what we have there are, we've actually got 2 permanent artworks, including Transforce by Lit Pencil Studio. And this is another transformation. I don't know if you guys know, people know the overpass at Oak Tree on Aurora. The artist Vicky Scurry basically added to an existing bridge and just created this sort of chromatic rainbow that really has transformed that area and that site. And that was, again, it was something that was, that the community had basically requested that we do. We can also transform sites, sites that you might know, Westlake Park. The middle one is actually private property, but these are all temporary projects that are transformed through the addition of temporary art. And what temporary art does is, you have a sense that it isn't going to be there for a long time, so you need to go and see it while it's there. So it's kind of like that working on FOMO, that you really want to be there while it's there and see it. Also, another way to transform sites is really through interaction, to have different kinds of projects where you actually interact with the art, and then again sort of create that, change that site by your interaction. The other thing that temporary art allows us to do is sort of engage topical topics, timely topics, such as racial profiling, gender, issues of gender, sort of immigration, and those kinds of things. The artwork may not last very long. It allows us, though, to address things that are a little bit more of the time, and doesn't have that that needs to be timeless, which a lot of permanent artwork sort of have that kind of restriction. And then just sort of one more transformation that we're doing is on the waterfront, just right out there. We've got 7 artists working on projects that will eventually be out there in about 2023 when that waterfront has been transformed, including some welcome figures by geologist artist Sean Peterson and artwork by Buster Simpson.
That's it.
Thank you, Rory. Sorry, I didn't actually introduce you. But so now we're going to have Duffy and Stefan, who are the founders of Electric Coffin, They are also the hosts of tonight's event by way of their exhibit here. So come on up.
We are next. Cool. That's a horrible photo. Let's just go next. You know what we look like. So I'm Duffy. This is Stefan. We are Electric Coffin for the most part. So it's an artist collaborative studio that we are the artists. We have a very talented team of folks that work with us, from designers to fabricators to project managers that herd the cats of the artists that we are. And ultimately, our studio in a nutshell is an art studio that was built for the commercial space. So years ago, we were having conversations about sort of the design build world, and really talking about where people are, and people aren't unfortunately in museums. They're not in galleries. This day and age, most people are in restaurants. They're in malls. They're at work. Everybody's at work for way too long. And so we thought if we could build a studio that could use art as a solution to problem solve for those spaces and putting the art where people are. So we sort of backdoored. Our first tagline was we were smuggling fine art into places it didn't belong. Did I miss anything? Yeah. So our whole our whole ideology of the studio is based around collaboration and based around exploration, and we try to push that through our client work, but also our studio's artwork. And the intent of our work is to create opportunities for people to be sort of confronted with something that's unexpected, whimsical, a little off kilter. And hopefully, if they're willing to engage with the work, we try to have multiple layers. So we're sort of rewarding their curiosity. The deeper they dive into the work, the more things they'll find. And it's been our luck, and also, I guess, hard work. We've been able to span across multiple industries. So we work in the design and build world. We've worked with ad agencies and created large sculptures in the Oculus train station, all over the country and all over the world to bring art in spaces that normally you wouldn't find art. And just kind of a little bit about sort of this is the boat. If you've been to Westward, this is a project we did years ago. This is one of our first projects, and I like to show this to people when we're talking about our studio. It's just a great sort of amalgamation of sort of the backbone of our ethos as an art studio. This is an installation, a sculpture, that also has a function. It stores all the booze. But outside of that, very important function. But outside of that, it also does a myriad of other things for this restaurant, which is it creates a focal point. It creates something for people to engage with. It was something that they extrapolated their branding and their look and feel from. Kind of, no pun intended, but really became the anchor of the space. And it started to do all these other things, have all these other effects that we could have never predicted. And again, this is in the space of commerce, and we're talking about public space, but I think this illustrates really well. People were willing to sit at the bar and have another drink because they were so engrossed in looking at the boat. It became something that people wanted to take photos of. So if you were seeing photos of the boat, you were sharing that you had that experience. It really became sort of the heartbeat of this establishment, outside of the great food. But it was something that they were able to kind of really dig into and utilize as a platform. And I think that was a big striking moment for us, that art doesn't have to be in a gallery, it doesn't have to be in a museum to be impactful. And ultimately, the more unexpected places it can be, the more impactful it can be, because people aren't anticipating having that reaction to, they're going to eat dinner, not going to look at paintings. So to be able to get that type of visceral response, I think, is what really interests us as a studio. No worries. I don't know. Did you post all the slides?
I didn't post anything.
Oh man! All right, we'll just rifle through these. I thought there was a selection you could just choose. This is on Capitol Hill. It's one of our pieces. This one, so I would say that this piece is really important to us. This is in Facebook. This is one of our favorite pieces we've done. What you're looking at is a quote. It says, "Live like the future's on fire." We recorded the quote into a mobile device and then took that mapping and created this sculpture. So this is a 3D analog representation of a digital sound. And it's built from individual spires. Each spire is made up of assemblage of objects and then flocked. So it's very tactile, you can touch it, it's soft. So each spire has its own narrative, but together creates one voice. And this is something that we worked on for 8 months. Yeah, it was a lot of time in the studio, a lot of conversation. We really poured our heart and soul into this. Stefan pretty much flocked this himself, so he became a flocking expert. And this became a defining moment for the studio just because we felt like this was one of the there was so much heart in this piece, and it broke our heart that it was behind sort of a badged entry, which we understand people work there and they have to have great art, and we're thankful for Facebook to create these opportunities. But it got us talking about, how do we put this in work in the public space? And so we started to, investigate the public sector. And what we found was that there was, a few calls out there. They were very sort of predictable. Art was relegated to murals or was relegated to sculptures on the corner. There wasn't a lot really going on the city side as far as pushing the limits of what public art could be. Whereas on the private sector, where most of our work was, we were getting opportunities like Dynasty Room. So this is an old restaurant in the International District. It's 4 C's. Dynasty Room is the bar inside. And they are developing this property, or they were going to develop this property. They are, but a year and a half ago. So knowing they were going to develop a property, it's being developed by people in the neighborhood. It's people who are developing a building that actually enhances the neighborhood. It'll have, what's that called? It's mixed use, affordable living. It'll have community space. It'll have space for local businesses. And so what they wanted to do is they asked a business owner in the neighborhood to activate the space for a year and make it accessible for people in the community. So pizza parties after karate lessons, games that people wanted to play, all kinds of things. Whatever people want to do, they could book it for free. And so he came to us and asked if there was a way that we could collaborate with him. And then he was working with Board and Vellum, which we work with, and some other talented folks here. And so it was a way that we could, again, through the private sector, we created this project where we were able to tell the story of the neighborhood and what they were trying to do, and the growth in the ID, and the old meets the new, and really sort of share the positive experience of the history of this building and the transformation of this neighborhood. But we did it in the most ridiculous and whimsical way possible, which is we created a temple in the front of the bar. We created some art objects for the bar. Obviously, there's a 14-foot tall cardboard wolf temple. There's a gift shop in there, and we got all the objects that are in there are from the neighborhood, and we sort of added to them. And we created a zine and a website, and this whole experience. And the idea was to tap into the popular culture of museums of something, ice cream, color factory, all these sort of immersive social media experiences. But what if those weren't just to, get some hipster rich, but to actually go to a good cause and tell a story? So could we hack that sort of social currency, which was the intention. So we built this full immersive space. Everything was engineered and designed to be shared through social media. It was voted Bar of the Year, even though it was a temporary establishment. So for us, it was a win. It kind of proved our concept that you could really push the boundaries and people would respond. So really, the whole reason why we're here is to just cycle through these photos, is to talk about how we can transfer that into the public space and really start to look at what's going on in the public sector, decisions that are being made in the public sector, and if there's a way that we could shake up or rethink artist engagement and opportunities, also build a creative economy. Creatives are starting to leave as different industries are taking over. Yet there's tons of opportunity for them to engage and immerse themselves in all the change and building that's happening. So that's where we're at. Isn't it?
It's great. I think keep it short. We can move on to the plan.
Short and sweet. All right. Thank you, guys. Okay, next we have Greg Bell. He is the Chief Curator for Vulcan Inc.
Thank you. Hi. A little bit of background is that I'm actually a trained sculptor. In other words, I got an MFA and I couldn't find a job, so I had to find something else. So I ended up doing display work for the Bond, which is now Macy's, Nordstrom, things like that, which ended up working into museums, etc. So I was curator at the Tacoma Art Museum for many years. I was the director of Kittredge Gallery at the University of Puget Sound for many years. And then I ended up being the curator for the King County Public Art Collection, working with For Culture, where I had the opportunity to work with all of the pieces that were in the public art collection. Now, I think Ray and I were talking earlier that the city started their public art program in '73, and I think the county started in '72, which is some of the earliest in the nation. So that means that there are more artists who have been working in the public realm in the Seattle area than most places. So we're really rich with that. So they have a lot of people, there's a lot of artists out there who have tried it, who are successful in it, and who work around the world that way. After working at For Culture, and I managed a gallery over there, so I decided to go to the dark side, where I took a job with Vulcan, which was an unknown at the time, and everyone was like, God, why are you doing that? Because I saw the opportunity there. I mean, there were so many things that they were doing that people really weren't giving them credit for. So if you have been in the area for a while, you realize that Paul Allen at one point wanted to turn South Lake Union area into a park. The city said no, but he said, oh, I'm buying it anyway and building buildings. So with all those buildings, there's been an incredible amount of artwork that has been brought in. So since 2003, Vulcan has put up and commissioned about 25 pieces. And I think Duffy made the observation that, it's not just, there's not enough opportunity out there because it's just going to end up being like a sculpture on the corner or something. We like to take the opportunity to, bring an artist in, talk to them, and it's a collaboration between the landscape architects, the clients, the developer, and the artist, and then we can see what we can do. So we have an idea about what we're going to do, but then that changes. So we never really know exactly what it's going to be. We have, when I say we, Vulcan has voluntarily decided that they will give 0.5% of all construction costs to putting artwork out, which is part of Paul Allen's vision about sharing his love for art. I don't know if you saw it, we did a show at Seattle Art Museum called Seeing Nature. We did landscape paintings from the collection. It's just another way to, kind of show that there is potential out there, and we just want to continue with what we can do and get that conversation going. So let me show you a few things here. Now, what am I pressing?
The click on the right.
All right.
Yeah.
There's nothing. It's still me. Okay. So, for example, this building, which is now an Amazon building, we had this public space and we tried to activate it in some way. So we looked at all these different things. We had a really good landscape architect we were working with, and they had an idea for this garden space down below. We also had these little mini kiosks with restaurants going on. So we thought, well, how do we engage people on that level? So we looked at a variety of artists. We asked them for proposals. We got a proposal in from Spencer Finch, who, ironically, is not here. He's from Brooklyn. But we thought, let's try him, because he's been doing some very interesting things. And this was a number of years ago before he's kind of achieved the notoriety. He also did, if you've been to the 9/11 memorial, he did the watercolor piece down there. And so for this piece, we brought him in. He gave us a proposal, and we said, Spencer, this just doesn't work. We just don't like it. So let's come back and let's talk about it. So we brought him out, and we talked about what we could do. And as we're talking about the building, and we're talking about what was going on there, he said, well, what about the canopy? Can I do that? Well, sure, why not? because he'd already done some glass pieces before. He had a piece on the High Line talking about the East River and the colors there. So we said, sure, let's take a look at that. So he came back with a number of proposals, and then he finally was here for a few days, took a walk in the forest, and he said, I want it to look like the sky and the sun coming through a dappled forest. And we said, cool, let's try that. So it worked as a collaborative thing because he gave us the design. We then went back to the contractor and said, we need to have this built into the building. Can you do that? They worked with the glass manufacturer, and we got this done. So it was, a very collaborative project. All right. And two pieces here by Jenny Heichman, who's a local artist, and they are kind of kitty-cornered from each other. You've probably seen them. These are also for Amazon buildings. So wood pile, and then cabin corners. So cabin corners outlining a cabin that was there, and I cannot say if this was historically correct or not, but kind of a Disneyfication of it, which she was tapping into. And then across the way, we have the wood pile with the piece being held up with the ubiquitous blue tarp. And I love that because so many people are just like, why did they leave the tarp there? And they just don't get it. So it's really nice to have that kind of trompe-l'oeil thing going on, but with the fake logs on the other side. But it's a really nice yin-yang to it, and I really appreciate that work. All right, try and move quickly. And then an older piece down here. This is a placeholder by Claudia Fitch. Claudia did the large heads there at the stadium, if you've seen those before. Claudia has, I think, one of the most unique set of, her vocabulary is stranger and more beautiful than anybody else working in this area. You never know exactly what she's working with. So here she decided to make these large plant-like forms. She also is a ceramicist, so you might see some of the same kind of textural things going on as she does with her ceramics. Another ceramicist is Akio Takamori, who worked with Fabrication Specialties, who I will say is a great asset to our community. If you are an artist who needs to work large, you need to talk to FS. They worked with Akio, made these out of aluminum. Akio made them out of clay first, and these are out in front of Whole Foods. Amazing pieces. They look like clay. They engage people on so many levels, and we are lucky to date they have not been tagged. There's a respect for them. Another Amazon building. This is Dan Corson's Nebulous. Another collaborative piece. So we start talking about what do we need. We have this plaza out front. We know we're going to have retail. We know this is going to be an entrance here. We need to have this activated in some way. So he said, who's it going to be there? Who's going to be there? We knew at that time it was going to be Amazon. He's like, cool, cloud technology. Ooh, yeah, go for it. So he did. He came up with this, and this is switch glass, so it illuminates. They go transparent and then translucent, transparent, and it's suspended over the top of the walkway. And there's also some LED lights in the walkway that mimic the same lighting theory. And another older piece, this is Buster Simpson. You saw some of Buster's work before. Buster is the granddad of public art in this area. He's worked all over the world. If you've been out to Brightwater, he was one of the lead designers for Brightwater and all the things out there. So this is a ping pong table that was co-sponsored by Schnitzer West, who was the developer at the time. And you can get ping pong paddles from the clients, the owners of the building now, and you can play ping pong. And if you look at the legs, there are opposing, here we got it right here, Max Planck, Albert Einstein, James Watt, so they're having conversations as you play. And then the other piece is by Whiting Tennis, which is in an apartment complex. It's called the Laundry Strike. So we brought in Whiting, who had never done a large piece like this before, and said, well, what can you do? And he said, well, where is it? And we talked about the building and how we wanted to retain some of the elements there. So he did his background, and he said, well, that's the site for the historic laundry strike, where the women decided they weren't going to work for those wages, and he decided he wanted to somehow make a monument to that. So in his infinite wisdom, he decided he was going to build it out of wicker first. And I said, well, have you ever made anything out of wicker? He said, no, like, why worry about that? So he made the entire thing out of wicker first, and then he had it cast in bronze, and it looks just like an old wicker chair, and is really quite beautiful. So part of what I get to do is is work with Paul Allen's art collection. That's my main job, is I'm the curator for that collection. When we were developing the Allen Institute, we had this one site out front, and we kept saying, we gotta have something out there, we gotta have something out there. And we didn't know exactly what it was going to be. And we were being true to ourselves that we would engage some artists to make a piece. We were going to commission an artist to do that. And in the meantime, we started seeing these works by Jaume Plensna, who's a Spanish artist, and Paul really liked them. So we said, can we buy one? He said, sure. So we ended up buying these 2 figures for this site. So these are site-specific. I went to the studio. He saw the work where it was going to go. He designed the lighting for it. So they're specific to this site, but they're part of Paul's private collection, or now the Trust collection. But as far as I know, they're going to stay there. So I mean, they just they became this real beacon at night, which are really quite amazing. And then you saw a piece that Rory showed you by Lead Pencil, Annie Hahn and Daniel Mahalio. We've worked with them on 2 projects, and this one over here on the left is called Restack. And they looked at a kind of a typical facade of a building that was there, kind of a early 1900s, late or 1800 kind of building, and then thought about what that facade might look like, and then went about from there and decided to make it out of boxes like Amazon would pack all their packages in. So they made this facade out of wire boxes, and it also becomes an entrance into the space. So there's a Marassi fountain in there also, so you walk through that into the space. And then there was an apartment complex that Vulcan developed, and because there were no alley vacations, that we had this whole interior courtyard that we could play with. So we thought, well, geez, this could be really cool. Why don't we do something that's a little unusual? So we decided we would build a treehouse. And we put out an RFP for a treehouse, which was pretty interesting because we wanted to get somebody in there who could do this, because we knew that it also had to meet all the codes. So it had to be sculptural, and it had to meet all the codes. So this is an amenity for the people that live there, but it's also a sculptural entity because you can see it from the ground. So hats off to Annie and Daniel, because I don't know if I'd want to work with anybody else on this, because it was fraught with problems, but it's an amazing piece. They worked with a boat builder in Ballard and just basically made a boat upside down and just put on a stick. But it's amazing. It has a little fireplace, and it's really quite nice. And then this is on 8th Avenue North between Thomas and Harrison. And it's a series of 5 ceramic pieces by Jun Kaneko. And Kaneko he lives in Omaha, but Japanese born, and makes these handmade ceramic pieces to go outside. So these are anywhere from about 6.5 feet to about 8 feet tall. And they're just sprinkled down this winding road. So Vulcan worked with the architecture, which was graphite, and to produce this lunar, if I'm saying that right, so this wandering road. So we have these pieces as you walk down there, so they're kind of these markers. And then they're really beautiful. I'm very excited to see some of his first pieces here. And then another ceramic artist, Jamie Walker, who's the head of the studio art program over at the U. These are Beacon, Cloud, and Toto. They're this trio of pieces that within this kind of courtyard area. And the large spun aluminum one out front, and then the one attached to the building that no one really understands why it's there, but it's just this like growth. It's like shelf fungus. It's beautiful. And then this little Toto, which is hidden back in the corner. And this is very much what Jamie's ceramics looked like at the time. Another piece in the collection that we recently moved, I guess it's been a couple of years now, from the Seattle Sculpture Park. We put it there when the Sculpture Park opened, and then decided it was time for another audience to see it. So we moved it, again, working with Fabrication Specialties, with giant cranes to move it off that road, and then we placed it right in front of the Mopop and the turnaround there. So there's a whole new audience to see it, and there's one here and there's one in Las Vegas, up on a parapet up there, which is pretty interesting. But so we had this opportunity to move things around and just try and get the artwork in front of people as much as we can. And I think this is the last two. So these are two pieces. So we've had work in South Lake Union, and now we're working on some buildings in the Yesler corridor, and that's where these two pieces are. We're also now starting developing two properties over in Bellevue. So we'll be working with artists over there. Also, the one project that we're underway, and I have nothing to show you because we're just underway, is the Jackson Apartments. It's 23rd and Jackson, which had a lot of press, a lot of publicity about what was going on there. We had a lot of interaction with the community there. And we have 9 artists that we were commissioning for pieces on the Jackson property. There'll be 2 larger sculptural pieces. Let's see, I'm blanking on names. Paul Rucker, he's from here but now lives in Virginia, and then longtime Seattle artist Marita Dingus, who has not done a large public piece, so I'm very excited about that, plus 7 other local artists doing these panels. So we'll have 9 artists working on that one project. And then on Yesler, we have Maya, which is done by Saya Moriyasu, which is an 11-foot high figure. The largest piece she's ever made before out of clay was about 2 feet tall. So this was a real learning experience for her, but working with her and a foundry, we were able to scale that up. And then a new piece that we just completed, which is Gene White Savage and Nick Lyle doing this forged steel willow basket, which is an amenity for the people there, but you can see it from the street. So we're trying to engage people in different levels, in different ways, with using different materials and as many artists that are willing to partake in this, because we're interested in really trying, working with them collaboratively and bringing what they want to do into the scale and into the materials that will work in the public. Thank you.
Okay, last but not least, we have Matt Murray, who's the founder and director at Treason Gallery.
Thank you. Don't worry, I'm not here to sell you anything, so. Thanks for the informative presentations. It's been really good to see what everybody's been working on. I'm sure a lot of people are wondering what the hell Treason Gallery is and what it has to do with public art. The truth of the matter is that Treason Gallery was kind of the byproduct of a reaction to a lack of understanding and education in the kind of renegade art movement here in Seattle. My partner and I started the gallery when we were 25. We opened a small boutique in Ballard that eventually evolved into a formidable art program, and it was kind of a reaction to our initial outreach with the established gallery community in Pioneer Square. We wanted to create kind of a platform and a place for people, especially millennials, to interact with art, and art that we felt was relevant to the movement, and especially in the reaction to post-graffiti and street art. Surprisingly enough, we weren't welcomed with open arms by the kind of established community here in Seattle. They wanted nothing to do with us. And so we essentially rebranded our boutique and found a space in Pioneer Square right around the same time as the first Seattle Art Fair, and called it Treason Gallery because we found that that name was the most fitting application at the time, because we did feel at the time that we were kind of committing acts of treason, for lack of better words, with the ambition to open our art gallery, especially at a young age and not from a proper, formidable art background. None of us had an art background. All we did have was a bit of tenacity and some relationships with some artists in New York City and Los Angeles. So over the course of the last 5 years, we developed a pretty established program emphasizing the importance of street art and its effects on urban life. We've had a great opportunity to bring in some of the biggest names in street art to Seattle, and we were actually pleasantly surprised with the reaction that some of these artists had, being where they were at in their career when they were approached with the opportunity to show in Seattle. Surprisingly enough, 99% of them were never offered an opportunity to show work in Seattle. Seattle was kind of a foreign market for them. It was a place that they knew that they had a lot of established following, but they never had an opportunity to interact or engage with the community here. So we kind of just took that and ran with it. We had a lot of trying and failing over the years, and essentially what happened is a number of events connected, and we had the opportunity to work with the street artist Shepard Fairey, and it was just a matter of circumstances. And over the course of the first year in 2016, we put together the programming for this first big show that we were going to have. We'd had a number of month-to-month programming over that period of time, but we really hadn't had a whole lot of traction in terms of the international art community yet, because we were still a growing gallery. We were a new program. We were a program that was emphasizing the importance of engaging Seattle's art community with the international art conversation, but we just didn't really know how to do that because we didn't have the opportunities here in Seattle. So now we've had the opportunity to show artists from all over the world, and we've brought them in kind of on this, sweat of our own backs, by providing programming that we basically have essentially reinvested all the profits that the galleries made into continuing the program of the gallery, and it just became kind of this giant hamster wheel situation. And with that, what we are offering for local artists was, in our limited offering that we had, and we do have a representation of some local artists, was that we were able to couple their representation with us with the representation of some of these formidable artists that had international recognition. So Electric Coffin, for instance, was one of our artists that we represent. I applied the idea that if you were to go to a gallery and you were to see Shepard Fairey there 6 months prior, and then you were to go to the gallery 6 months later and see Electric Coffin or another emerging artist, say for like Brian Sanchez was one that we had, who's done a lot of commercial work, but he hasn't had an actual formal exhibition in a gallery space until last January. Our concept and idea was that if you were to subconsciously put two and two together, that they were of on the equal playing field, that we could give the opportunity for Seattle artists to essentially receive international attention by borrowing the attention of pre-established artists. So that was just kind of what we were doing in the gallery space. What evolved out of that was we found that our existence, although we viewed it as occupational, it evolved into vocational, because what happened is there was a demand for us to have a commitment to the culture of Seattle and really hold true to that and honor that. And so what we did develop over the course of years, and we had the opportunity of working with some organizations here in Seattle, one of them being Urban Artworks, who Kathleen's sitting in the back. We've done a bunch of projects together. Sorry to put you on blast, but what we did is we would bring in these large exhibitions, and we would basically have a guaranteed income based on the sale of these artists' work, that we knew they had traction, we knew they had the rapport in the art world and in the art market, and some of their art was at a higher value and a higher price point than some of the other artists that we'd work with. So what we would do is we would take the proceeds from their exhibition and reinvest them into the other 11 shows that we would do throughout the course of the year. And we would also try to create what we offered as a leave behind for the Seattle community. So we had the opportunity to take the internal programming of the gallery and expand it outside. And it was actually a lot more problematic and a lot harder than you would think it was. And I can show you some of the projects that we've done. This one was probably one of the most recent ones we did. This was with an artist out of the UK. He goes by the name of D-Face. He's had a pretty extensive career in both the commercial world. He's done a bunch of stuff with Virgin Airlines. It's really, really extensive commercial career, but he is kind of in the forefront of the street art movement, especially in London, side by side with Banksy and Ben Ein and some of the people that kind of paved the way for this movement in Europe. And we brought Dean out here last August, and originally what we would do is our pitch would be we would approach a wall that we saw that we wanted, because we saw that we were actually able to create quite a bit of buzz and interaction with the regular inhabitants, because the majority of people don't go to galleries, they don't go to art events, they are very intimidated by it. They either think they're there because they have to know something or have a formal education in art, or that they have to be there to buy something. So there's a real displacement in the way the dialogue exists in the gallery world. And we understand that and we recognize that. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to create an everyday interaction of art in the street, in the day-to-day life of an inhabitant of Seattle. So we were originally supposed to put a mural 3 blocks south, and we were working with a developer up until about 3 weeks before this show was booked, the flights were paid for, the paint was ordered, and the developer pulled out and said that they didn't want to allow us to paint their building, that they were going to tear down. This mural cost the trees in $60,000, and we couldn't even give it away. And if that doesn't speak to the displacement of priorities in the city of Seattle, I don't know what does. We were lucky enough and fortunate enough, there was a sign that was walking down the street on First Avenue, and this is the side of their Army Navy surplus store. And we saw a sign that they were selling advertising space on the side of their building. I approached the family-owned store. They were thrilled with the opportunity to put this mural on there, and it's the best thing that they said they've done in the last 10 years. They were a pleasure to work with. And just to give you kind of an understanding of a project management element of this, we're painting a mural for free for the city of Seattle. Diamond Parking owns this lot. Diamond Parking doesn't care that we're painting a mural for free on the side of this building. Diamond Parking made us pay $150 for every space, for 12 spaces, for us to be able to work on this wall. For 8 days. This is another one. I'm sorry if someone works for Diamond Parking, I apologize. This is another project that we kicked off with another like-minded individual. This is in the back of the Jupiter Bar in Belltown. Joey Nix was one of the artists that we represented at the time, and we still do. He had kind of a dilemma of a project with this bar that he opened called Jupiter Bar in Belltown. It's an amazing space. All of the art in Belltown, in Jupiter, came from Trees and Gallery. Joey and the other owner were big supporters of us all throughout the years. And Joey, who is a muralist himself, we can kind of conceive this idea of, wow, it would be really cool to turn this drug-ridden alley into a outdoor gallery. And so what we did is we allocated funds based on what Jupiter could provide from their startup costs and what Treason could provide from their one big exhibition a year. And we've painted 8 murals in this alley. There's one building that's left to get painted. It's DSHS, so if anybody knows anybody over there, send them a letter. They don't want to get it painted, but it's been great. We brought in 8 artists from around the country at varying times, and we've just kind of been renegade. Renegade's kind of been what we've done from the day one, and we are very, very grateful that we've had the opportunity to do this because unlike other formal applications of this, we haven't had to ask permission from anybody, and we haven't been constricted by having to ask for permission or go through the board or go through anything other than us having to make some sacrifices financially at times to make this stuff happen. So I'll kind of cruise through this. It's between 1st and Lenora and 2nd and Blanchard, just south of Crocodile. It's expanded now into Belltown. We're doing 3 other walls this summer. The next one's going to be behind Wasabi, and that's in August 28th. This is Shepherd Ferry. We've got, this was another great project that I worked with Selin. This was, working with a like-minded person who wanted to put something and utilize the outside of their building. This made major waves because it was an Amazon building. Amazon did not commission this. They had no understanding of that this was even going up. And it was a great project to work on. It was a 9-story banner that we printed on the side of the 9th and Thomas building. This is Drew Merritt. This was on the side of Chop Suey. This was another project we worked on with Urban Artworks. Another great opportunity to align ourselves. And then finally, this is D-Face painted a second mural when we had him out here in August. And this was during, on Capitol Hill, right next to Cale Anderson. And there was a lot of kind of backlash with this mural because BCU, unbeknownst to them, painted it over with an advertisement for Pride. There was a lot of community backlash because it was a tribute to Kurt Cobain, and it opened the door for an incredible opportunity for us to collaborate with BCU, and we're actually bringing D-Face back out with BCU on August 25th, and it was a great opportunity to educate people who are, kind of making decisions based on limited information in the community. And so I am very, very grateful to have this discussion. Thank you so much for listening to me. I hope this helped, and yeah.
Okay, we got a lot to say, which is great because our panel is extremely informed with the art scene, public art scene, it seems like in Seattle from both sides of the spectrum, whether it's commissioned by commercial spaces or, kind of more renegade, ground up guerrilla artists. But again, this is, the theme of this panel is urban transformations. And what I'd like to get to hear from each of you is what is the narrative that we're trying to disrupt in Seattle right now in order to enact the transformation? And what are the obstacles that you have faced in your positions in trying to create that disruption? Whoever wants this mic, take it from me.
I'll start. You want to start?
In short, I think the conversations we have a lot in the studio is the city is changing, and I think it's really great to be able to witness a modern city in the 21st century go through an evolution like this. And so as artists, the concerns we have is, public space, common space, and what's happening to that as the city's developing. The landscape is physically changing of our city, and so I think even though we were a smaller, more of a town than a city, there was lots of public space, and people were very comfortable with what's going on. 15, 20 years ago, it was very quiet, and in the context of things growing and changing and new people moving in, different industries taking over, for us, it's more about being conscious of, I don't want to say losing the soul, because I hate that stupid saying. It's more about just being conscious of keeping the city accessible. And I think that art is a great way to utilize public space and common space so that people can get the similar joy and engagement and experience versus just people in their tall condos, which I'm nothing against condos. And really just being conscious of creating an economy and a community that is about human scale and human experience versus just money.
I think the narrative that we have to sort of disrupt is that, one, that public art has to be one thing. I think it could be a number of different things, and also who gets to make the art. Traditionally there's been, I would say that it was primarily dominated by white males. Now we try to get everyone involved, and certainly there are a lot of women who are involved in art. Beth, who's there, whose artwork I showed, is also doing art. But we want to bring new voices in. We want to bring people who have not had a voice in public art. So in our program that we've been working to train young artists, emerging artists. Surface, who also works in our offices, we have a show at King Street Station now that is focused on the work of Indigenous artists. We want to recognize that this is Indigenous land. So the narrative is like, who gets to create the art? Who gets to claim the city? It's just, we want to disrupt that it is a certain population that can have a voice here, but that everyone has a voice.
I think the biggest concern for Seattle and where it's at generationally now is that Seattle is becoming rapidly an international destination, but it's unwilling to make the necessary changes to exist on the same platform as, say, most international cities. You look at Seattle and what it's done, and not to discount or minimize anything that we've done in terms of public art, but Seattle is a very beige city. It is a city that doesn't value any kind of diversity. It's a city that doesn't value any kind of misunderstanding of art. There has to be a very clear analytical understanding of art, and it's either highbrow or lowbrow. There's no middle ground for art, especially when it comes to public works. The biggest thing that I run into when doing public works projects is, what if someone's offended? And the reality is that we live in social media culture right now where everyone's opinion somehow matters. And the truth of it is that, people are going to be offended no matter what we're doing. It shouldn't stop us from doing something that we believe in, and it certainly shouldn't make impact in terms of who the gatekeepers are. The gatekeepers of Seattle have been who they've been for a long, long time, And the city is young and diverse now, and it needs to kind of make movements towards letting go of that old kind of chokehold that it's had in terms of what's right and what's needed and necessary in Seattle. So.
I feel like Mary Sunshine here. I think things are pretty good myself. And the reason I say that is because, I'm old. I've been around long enough to see like what's been happening here. The public art has been going on in the city since the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and the controversial stuff that's been up there, the stuff that was on the waterfront that just got trashed, that people hated, and it came down, it made national news. I mean, this stuff's been going on. We've been having it, and it's cyclical. Yeah, but I think that overall, if you make your way around the world and go to other cities, we do pretty good. I mean, we got some, as James Wine called it, the turd in the plaza. I mean, we have that kind of stuff, but we also have stuff that's integrated into the fabric of the movements. We have stuff that's, the poetry on the buses. We have lots of programs that are going on out there, and I don't know, I gotta give ourselves a little pat on the back every once in a while because I think, we can do better, but I personally think we're doing okay.
I guess I would say there's more professional athletes than paid artists. I think it's hard for anyone, whether they're diverse or not, to make a living making art. I think it's too, we've grown so quickly. My grandfather saw the invention of the automobile, and here we are. I think structure was implied very quickly on cities, and we've weeded out a lot of the intelligence, the creativity, the gesturalness, the whimsy that is human. I think we're meant to follow the lines in a city. I have an 8-year-old boy, and I feel like he's only allowed to stay on the gray strip and not touch anything unless you're at a park. I don't feel like that's really human. I feel like we could do so much better. And I think to your point, I think we've done well, but I don't know if the highest evolution of humanity is to sell each other things. I feel like wealth is accumulating into smaller and smaller communities, and maybe it's not allocated for the best things for society. And that's a systemic problem that's not just here, but...
I would also say that, although yes, I do believe Seattle's done a very good job, this isn't a quota-based problem. This isn't something that we just want to check a box and move on. I work in the development world, and I know that at the end of the day, especially in development, it all checks back and benchmarks to the pro forma. And so my argument to that is, yes, Seattle has done a very good job considering, but why does it stop there? And why can't it be more expansive than any other city in the world?
I just want to again sort of point out that it isn't just us. We have for culture, we have Sound Transit, we have 3 major agencies that are putting public art projects out there, as well as again developers, Vulcan. There's sort of this ecology, this expectation that there will be art with the projects that you're building. There are neighborhood grants where communities are always applying. We're always reviewing grant applications for public art. There is something about, that there's an expectation. We've been doing it for, I don't know how many years now, doing the 60 years or whatever. And so there's this expectation that maybe it's 40 years, that there is art, that you are expected to see art, that you have access to art. I think that is really the goal that we're trying to get out to people, and it can take, as I said, really different forms.
So in response to that, I would say, I think that you're correct. People come to expect certain things, and the conversation that we'd like to bring to the table from our studio is just how can we adapt that? The whole concept of this exhibition is people do expect that. So people have changed, technology has changed. We have millennials who are on their phones. So how do we engage people who aren't academia in art, who haven't been in the industry for 30 years and know that this is actually pretty good. I mean, there's a ton of new people moving to this city. The city is growing. There's new things happening. So how do we continue to evolve the conversation of what public art and art in the public sector looks like, so that people can actually get something from that, versus to kind of what Matt's saying, just continue to check the box. And as working artists, I think the frustrations that we see are we feel limited and handcuffed, or that we don't know about all the opportunities because there's not programs that are really getting the word out. And granted, we do our, we can probably be online all day looking for grants. Like, there's our part too. I'm not saying all artists don't have access, but I think that there's a disconnect in the conversation of what the establishments are doing and what programs they have versus what sort of the new generation of artists or people coming into the city are doing. So just trying to connect that bridge and create sort of the next evolution. The work, what's the new turd in the closet? Maybe it's neon pink and it's made out of acrylic and it's funny. I don't know. Something that people would take a photo of and put on Instagram, and then all of a sudden there's a conversation. So I think thinking about the work that way in that context of evolving its place in society and its function versus just what we've been doing.
Okay, I'd like to leave some time for the audience to ask some questions. Seems like we have a question over here.
So I know the center does tours, architectural tours through the city. Are you doing art tours? And if not, has someone put public tours together so that the public IQ around this can be lifted up? I think they need help getting there and seeing, especially like the Vulcan art. How do we get into that? How do we get a tour map that takes us around to that?
It's on the website. There is a map. We're reproducing a new map that has all the work on it. And yes, I have given tours because in conjunction with the art fair, I've given tours at the artwork in South Lake Union. So I can somehow get the information about where that website is so that you can find that map.
Thank you.
So we have maps for art that is in sort of the downtown core. It actually isn't just our art, but all the art, including privately funded art for culture, sound transits. And in about, I want to say maybe 3 to 6 months, we will have most of our collection online in a sort of e-museum, so we will be able to search that and also look at where that is. We will also, our collection includes 3,000 what we call portable artwork. So these are paintings and prints and glass works that are displayed in city offices, and we hope to get that on our website as well to make that more accessible.
I was also going to say that SAF tours also focus on not just architecture, but also the public art as well. So several of these things that you saw today are featured on our tour. We do have one tour specifically that is art and architecture.
It sounds like there's actually potentially an inherent kind of issue, problem with how we approach public art and accessibility in general in the city. And sort of this conversation of who gets that access to that sanctioned space. So we have a lot of wealth that's generated in Seattle, but we don't necessarily have that wealth being allocated to a diverse group of people with a sense of agency of implementing, art or self-expression. What are your ideas on how we can cultivate that and in effect inform the people who are coming into the city in trying to be a part of that conversation?
I would say it's an educated process. If you historically just coming from the commercial gallery world, I've had more trouble selling art, and not that art sales are the solution to the problem, but I've had more trouble selling art in Seattle than anywhere else that I've been in the world. Seattle historically is the lowest art selling city for a major metropolitan city in America, and on the flip side of that, it's also one of the wealthiest cities in the world. And so my question is why is that? The short answer of it is that there is a kind of historical narrative here in Seattle where the majority of people that are supporting the arts are supporting the arts in New York, they're supporting the arts in Los Angeles, they're supporting the arts overseas, and it's because inherently they don't believe in the arts in Seattle. They've found a lot more security in supporting the arts in established markets, and I think that that doesn't necessarily interact with public art, but what it does engage with is the lack of access to art in Seattle. On any given day in any of those other cities, you can have much more access to art, whether it be lowbrow art or highbrow art, it doesn't really matter. I think it's really about access and education, and we don't educate people on art here.
I think, in my very humble opinion, this goes back to, again, I think what we're trying to talk through and sort of challenge is the function of public art. Art in public space is a great way to get to sort of be a gateway to people's interest in art. And I think some of the things that we're seeing in this space is that either people are unaware of the work that's being put out because we're not talking about it enough, or the work that we're seeing tends to be, I mean, I guess this is somewhat, like, I don't need to see more Buster Simpson sculptures. Like, he's great, but there's like 40 of them in this city. We're so insular and we're so singular in the people that we support and that we work with. We don't bring artists in from outside cities. We don't engage with younger artists who are tapping into maybe more pop culture things. There's not really a wide spectrum of work that you see in this city. It's a very academia, it's very curated, it's indigenous, it's insular, it tends to be a little bit more monochromatic. I mean, you see the rare color every now and then. The Calders of the, as we were talking earlier, the gentleman, like, it's not really contemporary and expressive of a larger view than just what's through our lens. And so I think that that's a space that we fall short in the city and that we're losing people's attention. Nobody, you know, for a really simple example, Kaz has these inflatable sculptures. He's sending them all over the world. Taiwan is having this huge movement right now in sort of their resurgence and interest in art with their younger generation. They had their first art fair. They had a private commission where they brought Kaz, which you don't know who he is. He's a graffiti artist that paints characters. You know, regarded as one of the world's most influential contemporary artists. Brought his sculpture, and literally hundreds of thousands of people came out to see this sculpture and inherently started a conversation about the larger interest in art. We were the last city to get the Kasama Infinity Mirror exhibition. We were the last city to get Kendi Wiley's exhibition. There's not an emphasis on putting us at the forefront from the institutions that run art in this community, and there's not an emphasis on having multiple viewpoints or looking across the spectrum. So we sort of have this half-assed, very narrow view of what art is, and I think that's where we're losing people's interest. People are more enamored with going hiking and going to the lakes, which is great. I love doing all that stuff, and we live in a very beautiful city. So our art program should rival the natural beauty that's around us, and it's falling short.
I'm going to counter that. So we sort of have a sort of unwritten rule that 50% of the projects or funding goes towards regional artists, local in the Pacific Northwest. But we do bring in artists from all over the country and occasionally internationally as well. We have, for the waterfront project, we have 7 large commissions. 4 of them are actually going to artists from outside, which, you know, in some circles actually creates a different kind of backlash where they're like, why aren't you supporting local artists? So as I said, we kind of have a 50-50 split, but we really do try to, you know, we want to expose everyone to, you know, things that are, trends that are happening around the country, the thoughts of artists, the ideas of artists who work around the country, around the world as well.
I don't know if I need the mic unless someone's hard of hearing and needs that support for the recording. I did just want to point out, like, I don't think it's okay to consider it a flaw that we are emphasizing Indigenous artists. I mean, Indigenous people are literally, like, were genocided out of this land by the Treaty of Point Elliott. that was in 1855. Indigenous people were forbid from residing within what is now Seattle city limits and from creating indigenous structures. And so right now it's actually more like reparations and restoration for the land that we're on. And so that's just something I don't think should be left unsaid in this conversation, even if that's like not exactly what was meant. That it is always important to make sure that that voice is continually present. It's not like you pick one and then you move on to the next thing from wherever. Also, just I think it's really cool that like I feel like there's a lot of definitions of public art, which is simply just that which is out in the public and perhaps not always behind closed doors that might be accessible 24/7. And it is really powerful to see it coming from all these multiple levels of like the sort of corporate commission and then the grassroots DIY small business approach, and then as well as the more official and publicly funded work. So it does seem like a strong ecosystem, and just some of the really basic considerations that always come with these things where like, you know, something that can be DIY might be a short-term thing that could also be officially sanctioned, and some of these larger things last a long time. There's just like straight up construction, things have to be considered, like making sure that things aren't overturning and falling over and killing people. So you do end up with like a lot of large, bulky grass, because that's like what will corrode or like fall down and kill the baby that climbs it or the drop that climbs it. So I just wanted to point that stuff out. And I'd also love to hear about specifically how like different people on the panel might be doing some of that capacity building in terms of like actually getting people who haven't done large scale or outdoor public artworks before to get to do that stuff.
I'm going to start because we do have a program. We have been running a program called Public Art Boot Camp, where we really are making an emphasis to try to bring in artists of color, emerging artists who have not done public art projects, train them through a boot camp. And a number of them who have gone through boot camp have actually gone on to get commissions as well. So there is, you know, we really try to figure out ways to, you know, public art is kind of a weird field. You spend a lot of time, you know, sometimes designing, a lot of times you end up being sort of like a general contractor to get your artwork built. And so we're trying to, you know, sort of demystify that, but also at the end of our boot camp, the artists actually have an opportunity to apply for commissions, and I'd say about a third of the artists actually get commissions. They are temporary projects, but it really is that sort of foot in the door. So I think that we need to make a conscious effort to train artists in this sort of very weird field of public art.
You know, I have the opportunity to have a lot of money to work with, which is unusual in public art, which gives me the time and opportunity to work with younger artists who have never done anything on a larger scale. So they'll come to me, you know, I'll actually search them out and say, you know, you've never done anything like this before, but are you interested in it? And then we kind of go from there. So, for example, I spoke about the Jackson Apartments. So two of the larger sculptures, one is by an artist who has never done anything on a large scale before, and the other artist has never done anything in durable materials before. So we're trying different things. And then I've engaged 7 other artists who basically gave me a pencil sketch, and then I'm working backwards from there to produce panels. So it's a small piece, but nonetheless, it's working on a larger scale. So, and these are all African American artists from the area. So we really have, you know, made a conscious effort to work with younger artists who have not done things before, to really try and engage them and kind of expand their scope.
I have a question. I'd like to know if any of the panelists have any thoughts on more interactive art. We live kind of in a world now of post-Pokemon Go. If we think about public art from the standpoint of what we interface in our environments, and we live in this high-tech world, like, are there new forms that are coming into play that aren't necessarily just regular sculptures and visual, but ways that we interact with art that you're seeing?
So yeah, we're actually dabbling with the whole sort of digital AR component. Again, we're interested in where people are, and people are in their devices. So we're trying to find ways to put art where people are. We have a whole initiative called Future Machine. It's a multi-tiered initiative. We're in volume 3 right now. It's where we bring people from different industries, different artists, and merge it generally with a conversation around technology, and try to answer questions. Currently, volume 3 is about exactly that. It's about augmented reality sculptures that are placed throughout different locations, and again, giving people ways to access art through their day-to-day interactions with their phone or apps or whatever that might be. Again, trying to kind of cross that bridge and be connected with people that might not typically connect with art. So that's an important thing for us.
Yeah. The one AR piece that I was very excited about was a piece by Mel Chin that was in New York, where he built this like weird Viking ship kind of thing right in Times Square, and then you just downloaded an app, and then you just use your phone and you scan around, and there were like ships overhead and things flying around, and it was amazingly cool. But for the most part, technology like fails and breaks and fountains freeze up and all those things. So the reason you go back to like blocks of granite and bronze is because they don't fall apart. But having said that, I think that we really have to engage at a different level and try these temporary things and just, and they last a year or they last 6 months or a week. And so it goes, and you just move on. But yes, we have to try different things.
So just to touch on that really quick, when we were in Miami for Art Basel this past December, we did a whole campaign with Electric Coffin where we brought these placards that Duffy and I went around to various art fairs, and without express permission of the founders of the fair, we liquid mailed them to various places in the fair, and you could use your app to actually see a visual sculpture that we then were pushing through socials as well. And just to touch base on how that incorporates into exhibiting art, Treason has been working with a local company here that does three-dimensional scans of all of our exhibitions. And so what we do on the Friday after First Thursday, we have the entire gallery three-dimensionally scanned. We then go in and we code and imprint every piece of artwork that's on the wall. So someone, say in Berlin, who's following an artist that's showing in Seattle, can essentially walk through the entire exhibition, and we've been doing that for the last year and a half. And it's given a lot of people, especially for a gallery that has 1% of our support base being local and 99% being overseas. I mean, legitimately, 90% of the people that buy art from us have never even set foot in the gallery. And we give them the opportunity to experience the art shows through augmented reality, through social media. And so I think that you're going to see more and more of that. And that's kind of what's breaking. That's actually the only thing that's really breaking down the traditional art form right now, is the fact that artists no longer need the archaic art world to support themselves. You can have artists that have direct interaction with the consumer and their supporters via social media. And so you're going to see over the next 5 to 10 years, and this is strictly my opinion, you'll see the kind of regress of traditional institutions, and you will see that artists are actually going to be dictating how and who interacts with their art on a daily basis.
I think we have, go ahead.
I had an opportunity to work with an artist in New Zealand, and he was of Maori descent and fairly indigenous people of New Zealand. And then we got a project in the U.S., and I told him all about Seattle and how it was named after a Native American chief. And so he was very excited about that. He came here, and the first thing he wanted to see was an American Indian. And I brought him to Seattle and couldn't see any American Indians, and then I wanted to show him indigenous art, and he didn't feel that Seattle felt like the city it was named after. I was wondering if you can tell me what I can show him in Seattle that is representative of indigenous culture, not something that was 100 years ago, but something like, say, the last 5 or 10 years.
Well, if he's here in the next few weeks, there is our show at the Hout Show at King Street Station, which is the work of Indigenous artists, and on the plaza is an artwork by Kimberly Dariana, a very significant artwork. So if he's here, I would say, in the next few weeks, get down to King Street Station.
But you was also, what is the city doing about representing Indigenous people? Because we went down to the waterfront, and there's, as you say, a lot of engaged public art there. But
So we will have 3 welcome figures by Sean Peterson, who is Puyallup. And right now over at the Ship Canal, the Seattle Public Utilities is creating a series of facilities that will deal with this sort of tunnel that water is going to run through. And we have 3 Indigenous artists working on projects there as well. I mean, they're not out there yet, but they will be in the next few years. So, and there is a range of artists who are working. And in terms of our collection, we are very consciously collecting the work of local artists, Coast Salish artists, as well as other Indigenous artists. Certainly there's also an urban Indian population as well that we want to make sure is represented. So I think in the next 5-10 years you will see more artworks by Indigenous artists.
I know Indigenous art makes sense here.
Okay, are there any other questions, comments? Go ahead.
Just had a quick one about scale and materiality. So you mentioned in the discussion there were a few examples of artists who worked in a different medium or a smaller scale than the commissions they get as part of the public art program. And personally, I feel like a lot of the time when an artist works in a medium that they're more comfortable with, and then they translate that into something the scale of a city, street, or a building, something gets lost. And I just wonder how that translation process, when artists are working in a different economic context and a different scale or context, different material context, how they can be encouraged and supported to create something that maintains some of the qualities of the work they may be better known for.
I think that's a really good question, and there is a discomfort that they usually go through, but it's a conversation that you have with them about what's going to work and what I can bring to the table and what I can point them to. I work with foundries, I work with fabricators. I want to have their level of comfort be such that they feel good about what they're doing. I mean, at the end of the day, I want their artwork to be good, and I want them to feel good about their work. So I'm definitely not going to just leave them hanging there. Like, you saw the Ako Takamori pieces. He's, build larger pieces out of clay, but not that large. Right at the moment, I'm working with Patty Borchina, who's a ceramic artist here, whose work is usually like this big, and she's going to be building a figure that's about 12 feet long. So you have that conversation, and you just really want to make sure that they're comfortable with it. And you bring in people, you bring in friends, you bring in other sculptors, whatever it takes, just to make sure that they feel good about what their final product's going to be. I never want to just, let them go and walk away from it.
I guess you tell me if this is how you feel, but our studio was always experimenting with different materials and different scale. And to me, that's kind of part of the excitement. We have our sketches and our concepts and the work we do, but to be able to figure out how that can translate through different materials, or not even translate, but almost evolve or morph or change or progress, I think that's part of the beauty of experimenting with different materials, is the discovery that comes from that process. So I wouldn't be afraid.
Okay, well, I don't know if I need this anymore, but if we don't have any other comments or questions, maybe I can ask the panel if you guys have any final words or anything you want to say before we end the evening.
I would just add, I guess, that we live in a world that is accumulating all of this wealth, specifically Seattle at this moment. I think Bezos is worth $250 billion, was it? Yeah. I think it's half that because he got divorced. But my point is that all of this money is being allocated to individuals instead of a society, and it seems like we're really valuing consumerism, and we define our personal who we are, our worth on what we own and what we drive and what we wear, instead of these. I feel like we can do more. Humans are so capable and so interesting, and we're capable of so much more. I feel like 1% is great, but art in a larger context should be probably more than 1% of society. I feel like this accumulated wealth can make an incredible city, something that is inclusive and beautiful and caters to the indigenous people, caters to the new people that are arriving. I think we're offering something really hopeful in this presentation of art, and it's not confrontational, it's not meant to be, but I think we can do much better than we're doing.
It's hard to follow that up, but what I would say is that in addition to that, if anything, if you can get anything from what I was trying to say tonight, what I shared with you is that ultimately it's up to you and it's up to us. I have never taken any permission from anybody that we're working with, and if treason's proven anything, it's that anyone can do it. You don't need to come from established wealth or from a city fund. You need all you need is an idea. And what actually is Seattle's weakest point in the fact that this is a growing city and this is a brand new city, it's that an idea is wide open here. You can do anything here, and unlike Los Angeles and New York, where there's 100 guys lining up to do whatever you just came up with doing, there's not that many people out here that want to do stuff with art. And so that means that it's up to you, and ultimately it's your responsibility and your duty, if you really do value art in the public, to incorporate it into every facet of your life that you can, and support it in every way that you can, and continue to come to these kinds of dialogues and continue to encourage this kind of conversation, because this is just the beginning, and I think that we are on our way to inclusion, as Stefan said, and really kind of demanding it. We need to demand it from every element of the community. So, thanks, guys.
So, nice mention of the money there. But it was, and I joke about it, but it's only because it is about the fact that everybody has to get paid, but at the same time, it's not about the money, it's about the integrity of the artist. For me, it's always, at the end of the day, it's the integrity of the artist, and the fact that we, as a society here, really don't value education for the arts either. Coming from the spouse of an art teacher, that's where it starts. So we really need to, try and funnel that excitement of the arts back into the schools, so that we have people coming up who have some idea about what art is, rather than, just only knowing about their subject matter. What is it? It's subject matter. SME, is that it? SME? God, somebody told me that. What the hell is it? So instead of being a subject matter expert, you are more generalist, so that you have a better idea about art and culture. And that, to me, is where we're failing.
I'm going to be a little bit more positive. Well, bring it your phone. Right? I agree with everybody up here. I think that there's a lot of things. Ultimately, if I would say taking anything away from this, it's just that when I think of art and as a working artist, for me, it's more of just a way of thinking about things and approaching the world and expressing my thoughts. And so I would say, if anything, if we could all sort of but just understand, or try to understand that perspective, or how that can be incorporated in your daily life, whether it's what you're doing in life or in your job. If you have the opportunity, artists can be integral and integrated in multiple ways, which we have hopefully showcased in our vast commercial work in very unprecedented projects. But I think that just not discounting art and its function and its value, and trying to find ways to integrate that just in daily life.
Yeah, so getting back to, I guess, sort of the idea of public art and artists working in public is really the idea that, Seattle is changing. It's obviously, we're dealing with issues of displacement and, it is not becoming more diverse, although, we have a good immigrant population as well. But I think the idea is, as we embrace the new and also just remember, to sort of keep place. This is a very unique city. And the artists are really part of what makes it unique, and just think about placekeeping as well.
Okay.
Well, it sounds like, we have a culture that's changing. Everybody in this room has an opportunity, or should feel that they have an opportunity to engage with their urban experience. Again, it sounds like, we don't have a city that is overly saturated with expression, at least not quite yet. So really, it's dealing with the uncomfortable potential of, maybe not having someone accept what you're putting out there. But luckily, there are people who are all for that and want to foster that. And I think that we do have a very rich culture already established for placekeeping, and we also have a lot of space for placemaking. So thank you for joining us tonight, and have a good evening.